Hey everyone, Dragon Lord Jonik here once again for another campaign diary. Let's start off first to say I figured out how to do things in my truck and be less awkward for me. See, previously I would sit in the driver's seat. You can see the steering wheel here just on the corner of the screen. And what I used to do is I used to hold the camera kind of on the edge of the steering wheel. So what would happen is when I would be sitting in front of the steering wheel, you would get the shot of me. And thus that's why the camera moved a lot, was because my hand would get tired, I would move it somewhat, all that kind of stuff. But by moving over and putting it on my dashboard and sitting in the center, I can now get this shot, which is way easier for me, and it opens up my hands to use for talking, which if you watch me talk normally, and as you'll probably see here more often, I use my hands a lot. I next want to talk about why I use my truck to film a little bit. Just briefly, I want to try and keep these videos shorter. I feel shorter is better for the most part in this kind of stuff, mostly because I don't want to ramble too much and lose you guys. I want to kind of keep things condensed, get the gist of what happened, and kind of some lessons, some highlights, and some things to learn from the session. Now, as for why I film my truck real fast, as a college student, this is really convenient for me because it's in between two of my classes. I have an hour gap, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and so it's convenient for me to come here, in part because I actually have to trade out some books and some gear I need. So I already have to come back to my truck in the first place. So it works for me to just go ahead, come here, sit down for 20-30 minutes, however long, film the campaign diary, and then go back, grab my stuff, head out to my next class. So that's why I do it so much here. New orders from Bartholomew Fitzherbert. Fritzolas is marshalling forces. He's planning for an invasion. Go, stop them. That was a statement I used when I introduced my party to the next adventure. I called it 200 Shirtless Men, and we'll figure out why later on. So basically, that was just to kick off. I want to note that this one was also done on a bus. I didn't want to waste time. It was going to be a shorter bus ride. Well, the first time we did it on a bus, we had a 2-hour thing, so we were able to take our time a little bit. Coming on this ride, I knew how long. I knew it was only going to be about an hour, so I was like, okay, I want to keep it fairly short and succinct. I have my main thing I want them to do. Let's focus on that. Let's not waste time, or so I thought. Let's not waste time doing other stuff. So I kicked them off. I said, hey guys, go on this mission. And here's where we saw kind of the usage of that militia framing device along with the war framing devices. It allowed me to basically say, here's your orders, go and do it. And as good soldiers, that's what they did. They went ahead and did the thing they were told to do. Bartholomew gives them a kind of a small contingent of soldiers. He gives them a group of soldiers led by kind of a captain and says, all right, these are the guys who are going to go with you. Sure enough, they follow the road, they head north. I'll try and one of these days I'll scan the map I made, and I'll add the picture in a link in the little description below, so you can see roughly what my map looked like, and I can kind of point out things. And so they headed north, and they followed the road, and I made it so it was pretty easy for them to find it. I think I just said, oh, you follow the north, and at one point as you guys are crossing, going down the road, when the captain mentions we are now in Fritzolas' territory, we must be wary. We are now behind enemy lines. And shortly after, they find that they kind of hear the noises of men working, and they go into the forest. And sure enough, here's a large group of men working on building some siege engines. And at this point, Sonia, she asks, okay, tell me a little bit more about them. I'm like, all right, roll with perception. She rolled pretty high in her perception check. I started explaining, okay, there's about 200-ish men. They're all working to build these siege engines. She's like, are they armored? I was like, no, they're not armored. They're just kind of workers. They're soldiers, but their job right now is to work and to build. And I'm like, and she's like, oh, okay. She's like, so clothes, are they wearing shirts or not? Or, I was like, well, it's hot out. They're working, so there's a group of 200 shirtless men in the forest, and that got a crack out of everybody. Everyone was like, ah, ha, 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 that was funny, and it was amusing, and we still joke about today the 200 shirtless men in the wood. And this was it. This was the big chunk. This was going to be the one kind of giant combat encounter, and this would be it. And sure enough, that's all it was. I will say the party did a good job. They said they took their soldiers. The captain was like, all right, let's rush in, let's charge them. And I think Sonia was like, no, let's not. As a half-orc fighter, she's like, no, let's split everybody up. Let's split the soldiers up, and we'll corner them. We'll kind of corner them. We'll box them in. We'll split you guys up into like groups of 3. you guys take 3 sides, we'll take the 4th, and we'll all rush them at the same time. And the soldiers were like, oh yeah, that's a much better idea. And so sure enough, they set that up. And this I really liked. I think they really did a good job of using the soldiers they had. They had these extra soldiers, so they said, all right, let's use them. And so they're like, all right, and we all like, and I'll signal to them, and we'll all rush it. I was like, all right, roll initiative. And they rolled initiative. And basically what I did is I just rolled one initiative for the entire group of bad guys, so this entire group of 200 men. They went, and so they all charged in, and this is where we had some complications. We had some problems arise here that I want to talk about. The first off is that I also mentioned that yes, they were all 200 shirtless men. There were a couple like armored guards, kind of the captains and such, who were wearing armor and were kind of situated around a tent in the back. I also said that as you like rush in, you do notice a wizard, like a elf in robes, and you can feel. And the bard Hazel, our half elf bard, she rolled Arcana check, and I said, okay, you sense the magic coming off him. Clearly, this guy is a wizard or something. And they're like, okay. And here's where things kind of went really downhill fast. First off, we had some issues with kind of disparity in power levels, if you will. You see, after killing the baby black dragon from the first session, aside from ripping off the dragon's arm by Brayden, the party also took off the scales. And I had them roll performance checks. That way it wasn't just, oh, you guys kind of instantly tear off all the scales and stuff like that. But they use it to create dragon scale armor for Brayden the barbarian and for Sonya the fighter. And what it resulted in was I said, okay, it's dragon scale. Dragons have a super high AC, usually in the 20s. I said, all right, you guys now have an AC of 20. That was a mistake. I basically turned Brayden and Sonya into 2 walking tanks. And I mean, and super tanks for their level and for kind of the enemies they were facing. Nobody could touch them basically, unless the opponents rolled like 18 or above. Nobody could touch them. It took me a while to solve this problem, and I didn't solve it here at this one. But yeah, so that was one issue we had is, all these soldiers, they rush for their arms and they come to charge them and they would fight them, but they couldn't hit them. And so Brayden and Sonya would just slaughter. This became a slaughter fest for basically the 2 of them. And the reason why the other guys didn't get into this slaughter fest was because of the wizard, this elven wizard. I had made him a high level, and the idea was he would attack these guys. But the way they set it up, he wasn't in the right spot, and so these guys so Sonya and Brayden managed to make it in, and rather than kind of forcing them to fight this wizard, the wizard instead, he's like, well, I'm going to turn my attention to these other guys, and which was like Hazel, Sam, and Danny at the moment. Oh, Sydney was there too. Sydney was there. So, the bard, the ranger, the sorcerer, the cleric. These 4 were almost all single-handedly held off by this one wizard. He was like a level 5 wizard, and I think at this point everyone was still level 3. I think Brayden had made it to level 4 at this point. But everyone was still level 3, and this guy is, throwing fireballs at them. I mean, he almost killed Hazel. He took her from full HP to 1 hit point in 1 shot, while also still severely damaging Sydney and Sam. And so the 4 of them were all like, oh shoot, we gotta hang back. And eventually they did manage to kind of force their way up to him and kill him. And at that point, most of the actual fighting was done. Now, because of the way the party had set up with the soldiers and boxed them all in, I basically in my head said, all right, there's 200 soldiers, there's 4 groups, so each group will take on 50. We'll take on 50 shirtless men. And as the battle progressed, I would say, oh, you guys would look around and you'll see, your own guys, fighting their way through their group of the shirtless men, of Fritzolas' soldiers. And the guys and the party was like, okay, that's cool. Now, this is where we had another problem. We had the spinny attack. Brayden had managed to get a feat where he would wield Executioner in his one hand, and he had his Dragon Claw gauntlet in the other hand, and he's like, I'm gonna run into a group of soldiers and I'm gonna spin around and hit them all. And at the time, being a new DM, I admit, I was like, all right, you make a valid argument, I'll let you do that. Arguably one of my greatest mistakes of DMing ever. He would be able to kill 8 guys in 1 attack. At the time, I was kind of okay with this, but shortly after he had killed like 25 guys in a matter of like 3 rounds, I was or something like that. He had killed an absurd amount in only a handful of rounds. And he thought this was awesome. No one else did. Everyone else was kind of like, this is BS. And I was like, you're right, guys, this is BS. I'm sorry. And I apologized. And actually, and later, and after the session, I said, all right, guys, no more spinny attacks. I promise. I'm sorry. I will fix that mechanic. I will kind of, patch the system on my part. And I think that's one of the issues, is homebrew rules can be a lot of fun. And it's great to just go out, and even though I didn't have any of the manuals, I had nothing. All I had the player's handbook. And that's that's a good chunk of information. That's really kind of roughly all you need to know. I mean, you can run D&D using just that and be fine. But as a result, I was using a lot of homebrew rules. I was using kind of a lot of just as I went. If the players could make a valid argument for something, I would say, sure enough, go ahead and do it. And Braden felt what I made what I felt was was a valid argument, so I said yes. And later on, we realized that was a mistake, and so that happened. As a DM, especially as a new DM, you're going to make those mistakes. The same way as when you get new into any sort of field or hobby or activity or such, you're going to make mistakes. And they're going to be really big mistakes sometimes. They're going to be really lousy. And people are going to call you out on them. And that's okay. I learned from it. I got better. I also figured out that, hey, one, don't plan for a short campaign. I knew the drive would be an hour long, so I planned for a 1 hour adventure. And that was a mistake. There was no sense of epicness. Sure, they got some loot at the end, but it really didn't feel very well deserved, as it only took them an hour to get what normally probably would have been the loot for the end of a 3-hour adventure. They found, some maps and some charts and some stuff, some of the battle plans for Fritzolas after killing all the captains and stuff like that. In their tents, they found some stuff. The elven wizard, they found out was, as they searched his gear, he had a wagon with a bunch of his personal stuff, and they found out he was of a high family in Fritzolas' realm, and so therefore that's why he had the wagon. He had a bunch of stuff with him. They got they got some money. They got this knife. We called it the butter knife because when they rolled an Arcana check to kind of figure out roughly what it was, they rolled a 1. And so they're like, it's a butter knife! And what it actually was a knife I had created, was if you're wielding it, if a spell gets cast at you, what you can do, like an attack spell gets cast at you, what you can do is you can roll an Arcana check to kind of, and if you beat the caster's spell save DC, you could absorb the spell slot that was used. And I did it for Hazel, because especially after she had been nearly killed by this wizard, and she was fairly weak still, I gave her this, and the idea was it would go to her to she could use it to protect herself. Because she had a high Arcana. She could use that, and then she could use the spell slots herself. She actually has yet to use it once. We've been playing for a year now as I'm making these diaries, and she has still yet to use the knife once. There's a lot of items the group has yet to use. And that's another lesson I learned from this knife, was because as I was following this, I would follow this knife a lot because I really liked the idea, and I thought, okay, Hazel's going to use it now. She wouldn't. She'll use it now. She wouldn't. And I learned that while it's still okay to give your players home-crafted kind of magic items, take inspiration from the DM's guide or such, take inspiration and create your own stuff. Just careful it's not overpowered. You have to give them some stuff that they're going to like. That's something that will feel good. The leader of the Fire Bandits had this sword, Cold Cleaver. Sonia really likes it. She got the sword, she saw it in action, and so she really enjoys it. So that's why she's latched onto it. Braden saw the Axe Executioner in actions, thus he has an attachment to it. And so that's why he's still using it even now. So you gotta be careful with your magic items. You gotta be smart in how you craft them. Be careful of homebrew rules, and don't make things too short. I guess that's kind of 3 rules, actually. And I guess you can say that's what I learned from this campaign, from this little adventure. And I think there were some good rules. Everyone walked away and said, all right, we learned some stuff. It wasn't a great session, but we learned some things, and that's what's important. And yeah, so that was that campaign. That was that little adventure, 200 Shirtless Men. Probably one of our lower points in the whole campaign, but it was a good learning experience for all of us, and that's what's important. We still had fun later on, and I think in part because we learned from this. So thanks you guys again for tuning in. Thanks for watching. This went a little longer than I had hoped for, but that's bound to happen. If you like the longer stuff, we've had 30-minute episodes. This is going to be about, this is roughly about 15 minutes. Tell me which one you like more. If you like them longer or shorter, just comments below to let me know. Have a good day, guys. I'll see you next time.